Okay, today we're going to talk about Avodah Zara, and a couple of places where Avodah Zara and those dinim cross paths with us in Hashgacha. Not about Avodah Zara in general, but again, how it affected us, how we came across it. The first is about Indian restaurants, and that is the people from India have this practice of giving part of their food, putting some food in front of their deity. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Deity, I hope I pronounced it correctly. Okay, before they eat it. Okay, and the question is whether that causes some issues, Avodah Zara issues for us, and would we be allowed to give hashgacha to an Indian restaurant like this, where if they're doing that, or should we be concerned about them doing such a thing? Okay, so to some background is to help explain is that there are four. Shulchan Aruch tells us there are four different types of things related to Avodah Zara that make things aser. One is the Elil, the Avodah Zara itself, Tashmisha, things that you use for part of the service. Okay, part of the service of Avodah Zara, No'eha, things that beautify the Avodah Zara, and Takrufta, or Takrovis, which is things that are offered to the Avodah Zara, like a gift or something like that you give to the Avodah Zara. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch holds that in order to be considered Takrovis, that's our most, for us, what we're talking about right now is about Takrovis, that maybe they put some of this food in front of the Avodah Zara. So Shulchan Aruch says in order to be considered Takrovis, you have two choices. Either it has to be something that you use in the base.
Is it like an idol in the restaurant? Is it like an image?
Yes, yeah. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But yes, there often is. But one is you don't. The first way of becoming takrovis doesn't have to have the idol in front of you. It has to be something that you bring in the Beis Hamikdash: meat, oil, flour, water, salt. Okay, if you use one of those things and you offer it for an Avodah Zara, that's takrovis. The other choice is if it's not one of those things, but you offer it literally in front of the idol itself, that's also considered takrovis. Okay,
the other things are even what? Even
not in front of the idol. Okay, just bringing it, offering it for the Avodah Zara. So now the Ram, that's what the Mechaber paskins. The Ram holds that if you put it in front of the idol, it doesn't have to be. I'm sorry, I take that back. The second choice is you have to put it in front of the idol, and you have to do it in a way like you do avoid in the Beis Hamikdash, like shchita or zrika. You have to do some kind of an act like that. Okay, and the Ram holds that if you put it in front of the Avodah Zara, I'm sorry, any food that you put in front of any food that you give, that you offer for the Avodah Zara, as long as you do it in that manner, is aser. Okay? And an nafkamina for that, nafkamina is going to be for the people in the Indian restaurant. The people in the Indian restaurant are not putting food that you use in the Beis Hamikdash. That's not their food, whatever they have, beans or rice or potatoes, whatever they have there. So it will be a question whether that would be potentially qualify as takrovis or not takrovis, because it's not food that are given in the Beis Hamikdash. So spoke to some Indian restaurants and asked them, and then to some Hindu religious representatives to ask them what goes on, and they said that b'derech klal that this thing is called prasad or prasadam or something like that, and they said no, most usually that's only goes on in the temples, but in a restaurant that wouldn't go on. There's only some very very religious ones that have part of whatever group that it is. Those are the ones that you would care about. But in your everyday Indian restaurant, they're not going to be doing that. They said, no, that's not what's going to be happening. So just a little question to that is that, let's say that's correct.
So they're
not doing any kind of services in the restaurant. So for our side, it means is that if there's a mashgiach in the restaurant, he just got to keep his eyes open. He has to be aware there's such a possibility. They're not supposed to be, and only certain groups do that. But if you're the mashgiach, you got to keep your eyes open. Is someone doing that kind of stuff? There usually is an idol there in the restaurant, like for people walking in and whatever. So the mashgiach just got to keep his eyes open for whether this is going on. And then there's like a little bit of side question is what happens if the chef decides that he wants to do it, the restaurant doesn't do it? No, we don't do this. And the chef is very religious, and he decides he wants to do the stuff on the side. So if the chef is not the owner, so there's a rule, so then he has the rights to cook food and do all kinds of stuff, but he doesn't have rights to make food aser. So to that, in that, so you'd say, okay, no problem, he can't make it aser. But it's not so simple, because the Gemara says that if you do a maisa to something, then even though in adam oiser davar she'ein shaloi, ayidei maisa, you can aser davar she'ein shaloi. The Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos what that means. what it means that Aydei Maisa, you can't aser davar she'ein shaloi. Rashi holds anything, any Maisa, you do like this, that's a Maisa, and you could aser davar she'ein shaloi. You can't just do, And Taisa says, no, Maisa means is you have to do something, change the thing to davar she'ein, to make it aser, to aser a thing that's davar she'ein shaloi. So, again, so seemingly we told this, they just put it in front of the Avodah Zara, they don't do anything to the food. But related to that is that Crazy Place says this whole idea that
I serve somebody else's, I make an Avodah Zara somebody else's car. I ask his car because if I do a Maisa to it.
If you do a Maisa to it, the Gemara says, if I do a Maisa, you can ask it. Maybe I'm reading wrong. I believe that's what the Gemara says. So, but the Crazy Place says that whole din is a drabanan. That din, that Adam Osa Davar She'ein Shaloi Aydei Maisa, that he says is a drabanan. So the Machlokes Rishonim maybe make about that. I don't know. Okay, so I don't know. But anyway, the Mashgiach should keep his eyes open. If there's such a thing, there are plenty of people giving hashgacha to Indian restaurants. There is such a concept. They have such a thing in their head that they do. They take some of the food and put it in front of the idol before they start.
And then they take that food that they use to serve the Avodah Zara and
serve
it. Here's your lunch, sir.
I think that's my impression.
Really?
What would you say?
Not very respectful for the Avodah Zara.
What do you do with bikurim? You bring it to the base of Mikdash, and then
give it to the kohen.
So you say the kohen is special. Okay, I don't know.
That's
I
a Jewish thing that you eat it.
Yes, I don't know if I can climb into their religious practice.
I don't know. Just find out what they do. I mean, I think they take a chelik of it, and that's like makadosh the rest. That's matzah the rest of the meal. You know what I'm saying?
And then what do they do with it? My impression is that they eat it. That gets eaten afterwards. It doesn't get thrown in. But maybe I'm wrong. Okay.
But they certainly don't do it to all the food, right?
No, correct.
So I don't know. So look that. Make sure you don't get that, right? I mean.
Okay, so we talked about once whether Kashrus is bottle. We learned in this also was related to Hashgacha. There was a company that actually did that we talked about this when we learned Trappist, about a company that took water and they literally did a service with that water and then they poured it into the rest of the water that they used in the factory. So there was a shayla there of bittul. There's a question of bittul whether stuff could be bottle. Okay, not for today. Okay, our next day. Holy basil. That was what's on the picture beforehand. I didn't think we should put an Avodah Zara up there, so I put a holy basil. So it's called that because the Indians again considered it to be holy, but no one ever worshipped this plant. Okay, so you go to the fruit store and you buy basil, holy basil, nothing to do with anyone worshiping this thing. Okay, but there's some things we could pick up from this, and that was like this. First is, you can't ask something. You can't ask something, even if you would worship something that's attached to the ground, doesn't become asr. Okay, there's exceptions to those rules. There's two exceptions to that rule. One is if you worship the plant and then more things grow afterwards, that stuff is asr. So I worship it today and tomorrow it gets bigger. The part that grows afterwards is asr. Related to that is that if I plant it with intention that it should be used for Avodah Zara, that could be asr also. Okay, just if I go right now to a tree and I don't know, I worship that tree, then that tree doesn't become asr. But if more things grow on the tree, or if I planted the tree with intention that it should be used for worship, then it would be asr.
Can you just explain what's this? Isn't this they serve basil? What?
No, they consider it holy. They didn't worship it. I'm saying that's why it's not a shayla for us. Okay. But relevant for just from the thinking about whether
basil holy.
They consider basil holy, but they don't do any worship to anything like that. But I'm saying to you, even if they did worship it, worshiping something that's attached to the ground wouldn't make it us again, unless it grew more afterwards, or they planted it like that. But the second thing, which is even more relevant, I think, is let's say it was asr. Let's say they had worshipped it, and it would be in a way that made it asr. Of these, there's rules like this. Of these 4 types of Avodah Zara, of things related to Avodah Zara, the Elil, Tashmisha, Ne'eha, and Takruvis. For three of them, if the goy has them and he's mavatal it, he says I no longer consider it to be an Avodah Zara, then they lose their isser to them. Okay, for Takruvis does not have that din. Takruvis has a chumrah that even if you mavatal it doesn't work. Also for Yiddish mavatal things it never works. But for the first 3, if you mavatal it would work. So that would mean is that if he's going to be mavatal, we're looking at this as a lil. If you actually worshipped it, if you would be mavatal it would be fine. Now the Gemara says that. The Gemara literally says that selling an Avodah Zara is not considered to be a bittul of the Avodah Zara. But the Gemara explains that that's because they think that the guy who's going to buy it is going to continue worshiping it. I have my idol here. I sell it to somebody else. It's not a bittul because I figure the guy who buys it, he's going to go ahead and use it as an Avodah Zara also. But if you sell it in a way that's in no way anyone's going to use it. He's selling it in TEDs. They're not selling it in a way that anyone's going to use it. That for sure is a bittul. So even were it to be that this was could be considered an el, even if someone had worship, and this is going to be yet to what's coming in a minute, then it would be a bittul of the Avodah Zara, in which case it would be mutter. There wouldn't be anything wrong with it. Okay, so even if there was, even in theory, if someone would be worshiping it, we would be safe. And that brings us to our next thing, and that is L-cysteine. Okay, so it starts like this. In the late 80s, 1980s, there was a question about whether people could use human hair shaitels that came from Indian hair. And the question was, maybe it had some connection to an idol in this city called Tirupati. I think it's how it's pronounced. At that time, almost everyone said it was mutter. In the late 80s, almost everyone said it was mutter. Then in 2004, new information came to light. And some of the Israeli poskim, most notably Rav Yashiv, who himself had been matir in the 80s, said to you should be machmir, and American Rav Belsky and other American poskim thought you could be makel about this. Okay, it was a whole to do about that. So it's a big to do, but it has nothing to do with us. And the reason it has nothing to do with us is because there are people who have approached hashkachas and asked them to give hashkacha on their shaitels. This is true. There has been approached. But anyone who's giving hashkacha on a shaitel would be giving hashkacha that it does not have the Indian hair. Right? You wouldn't say, I hold that it's mutter and therefore I'm going to give hashkacha to it. That would be silly. That the people who are looking for hashkacha because they don't want this hair from this that went through this service, it would be takruvis. This would be takruvis and bitter wouldn't help on it. Okay, bitter wouldn't help the fact that they sold it. So the people who want the hashkacha would want hashkacha that's not from India. And so whether you personally would think mutter or usher, your Rav Machshir think wouldn't make a difference as hashkacha. Okay, so that you say, big deal. So this shaila is a nice, interesting shaila, has all kinds of questions to it, which we're not going to talk about, but it's not relevant to me. Who cares? If we were hashkacha, we wouldn't care about that. But there is a related question, and that is about L-cysteine. Okay, L-cysteine is an amino acid. It's used as a dough conditioner all over the place, including in lots of kosher food, kosher breads. It has other uses also, but it's one of the most prominent uses as a dough conditioner. There were people who thought that it maybe came from cadavers, which would make it usher because a mace is usher b'hana. That wasn't true. Then there were people who thought that it came from chicken feathers. There's a possibility it could come from chicken feathers, and we talked about that when we learned basil b'chal taruvos also. But the shayla about chicken feathers and blias of dam in them. Don't worry about that for now. But we have to worry about for today is people said also it's from the same places, the same hair. Get it? It comes from here also. Comes from when it comes from human hair, it would come from the same service in these temples. In which case, all of a sudden the shayla about the shaitels would be relevant to us. Okay, again, no one's asking for hashkach on the shaitel, but you're buying a loaf of bread, and in it, it's got this dough conditioner that comes from the same hair, would come from the same hair in the temple. All of a sudden, we would have to think about it, and even if we think it would be mutter from the temple, it would be like a funny question. Should I serve you bread that you don't even realize has Indian hair shaitels inside of it? Like would we reduce even if we thought it was mutter? Okay, but the good news is, Baruch Hashem for the Jews, the good news is that the people at the temples grow the hair really long, and then they cut it off in the temple, and wherever it fits somehow into the service, whether it's part of the service or not, so part of the shayla. But the people at the temple who sell that hair are going to use it for people who have the advantage of having long hair, like a shaitel. You want to make a wig out of it, then having long hair makes a difference. From L-cysteine, you couldn't care less whether the hair is long or short. You just need pieces of hair. So it turns out that they actually get their hair from barbershops. That's what they get from. They sweep up the barbershops and they get that because that you can never make a shaitel out of that. But if you need what?
Who would have thought?
Right? Who would imagine? Right? Remind me, I went to a fish place once. They use everything.
Local barbershop, you can get something.
Saves money, make money out of his thing. Anyhow, so we're good. We don't have to worry about the L-cysteine. There are other potential kashrus issues, not for today, but coming from here, we're safe. Okay, next. At the end, you'll find out why I'm telling you about this next thing, about Greek gods. Okay, Torah says, okay, and from which comes an Isser, you're not allowed to say the name or write the name of an Avodah Zara. Okay, so there's a Truth in Beis Yitzchak who was asked, they wanted to name a hospital after something to do with a Greek god. I couldn't get exactly the name of which god he had in mind. And he said, and the question was whether they could do that because the name of the hospital is this isser of saying that every time you say the name of the hospital, it'll be saying that the name of that Greek god. So he says, look, I don't think anybody worships this god anymore. He says, but I don't know. He says there might still be people. Who knows? Maybe there's some people out there who are still worshiping it. So it's still a functioning God, and therefore we shouldn't name after this thing. Therefore, he said you should not name the hospital after that. Okay.
So if nobody's serving it, then it's mutter.
So that it's obvious to him that if he says that would be a bittul, of the Avodah Zara. He says, but if maybe some guys still worshiping it. Okay.
But it's the name. It's a bittul.
What do you say?
That's a chiddush, right? And bittul is, I think, a specific Avodah Zara. This is a bigger chiddush than that.
Because the whole Avodah Zara,
it's just a name. There's no specific Avodah Zara in front of me. It's just a name. The name is a name of Avodah Zara. I mean,
it's out of business, right? I mean, he's bankrupt. I mean, he's not a functioning God anymore. No one could care less about him anymore.
Nobody serves him.
Okay, so that's what he thinks Timit's Pasha. And Rebelsky said further. Rebelsky said, no. He said, listen here. He says if it's been hundreds of years since anybody worshipped this thing, this is a Greek god. No one's worshipped Greek gods in hundreds of years. He says it's gone. The whole thing is a wholesale bittul of the Avodah Zara. It's completely gone. Now it happens to be that there are people in recent years who have started re-worshipping these Greek gods that have been out of business for 1,000 years. But that didn't. I don't think it bothered him. I don't think it bothered people because that's like, imagine if today people start saying the name Stephen, they name their god after Stephen. You didn't say Stephen now becomes the name of Avodah Zara. It's like it was a name first. I mean, like you stole it from us. Like you took our name, and that would be awesome. But so he said no, it's completely wiped out. I mean, the Avodah Zara is totally out of business. It's been hundreds of years. The fact that there might be one guy left in some town, someplace that's doing it, don't worry about that. Okay. So he says it's not a shame of him, you could use it. So and Mela. Before we get back to the food part of this, it's why we say things like, I'm going to show you in a second, all kinds of names of Avodah Zara, you use them all the time. Like Nike, okay, which is the name of a god. As is all these other ones over here also, okay? Well, the Greeks, the Romans, I think the Romans, knew about 5 planets, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus. And they named them after their gods. Those are the ones that they could see. Later, when people had telescopes and they could see Uranus and Neptune, they named them one after a Greek god and one after a Roman god. Okay, the names of the days of the months, January, March, April, and May, are named after Roman gods. I'm going to get to Tammuz in a second. Okay, named after Roman gods. And the days of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Kinneret, are Norse gods. I don't know what Norse is, but it's Kinneret. Those are names of gods also. Okay, so why are we using all these names? Why do we use all these names of things? Because for the same thing, they're out of business. No one worships these things anymore. So did the Yidden, I don't know, 1,500 years ago, were they able to call it Mercury? I don't think they called it Mercury then. But for us, it doesn't mean anything. Okay? Now, one over here that's different than the others, a little different than the other, is Tammuz. Okay? Which Tammuz is named after a Babylonian god. Okay? You could even look him up. He's still on Wikipedia. His own Wikipedia page. Tammuz, the Babylonian god. So there, it's different. There's an extra reason why we're allowed to say Tammuz, because even you could say Tammuz even in the Gemara says Tammuz when it was still a functioning god, and that's because the Gemara says that if there's a name that's used in Tanakh, then you're allowed to say it. A name of an Avodah Zara that's listed in Tanakh, you're allowed to say that. Mechaber brings it, and it's a pasuk in Yecheskel that uses the word. It has names talks about this Avodah Zara called Tammuz, and therefore if you name an Avodah Zara, if it's in Tanakh, you're allowed to use it. So we're good. So we can say Tammuz even if you don't believe this whole thing about Avodah Zara being out of business. Now, just within that prat, I'm going to get back to food in a second. I know we're off topic a second. The question is, why, if something is in Tanakh, does that mean you're allowed to say the name of Avodah Zara? What's the logic behind that thing? Okay, so lots of people quote the Uraim, who says, the Gemara says, Kol avid's kavim haksu b'Torah mutla haskir. That's the Gemara. But Taima, what's the reason? What's the logic? Why it's happy? Kivin shehiskin is papa. So a lot of people who read this, poskim who read this, say to him, "Oh, because he was mavatalin." And they say, "What are you talking about? The Torah talks about the Tanakh talks about Avodah Zaras that were up and running. They were functioning Avodah Zaras. It's talking about the people. It's talking about. It's not talking about Avodah Zaras that had bittul to them. It's talking about Avodah Zaras that are functions. Like what does he mean? A lot of people quote this Yiraim, but what does Yiraim mean when he says it's because it's batal? What do you mean by that? So I'm not sure, but I thought that it doesn't say kivin shehiskir. Kivin shehiskir. We know that they were mevatel. It doesn't say that. He says nispatla, as if to say is the fact that the Torah talks about it. The Torah when it mentions an Avodah Zara is by its nature putting it down. It's by its nature saying this is what they worship. It's a negative. It's automatically negative. And the Torah says about the people worshiping Tammuz or any of the other Avodah Zara is in a negative light. They worship that thing, which is a bad thing. So that in itself is a bittul. The Torah is being mavatal. It's nisbatla just by being listed in Tanakh, rather than not because a human being chose it. The Torah, man, once the Torah used that in a negative way, you could use it also. I wasn't sure if that's what you meant.
So maybe it wasn't in Tanakh. It came over the Tzaddik Kedusha. The Kedusha, the Torah is mavatal.
Okay, that's not my...
It's like Lubavitch adopted the French national anthem, and then the French took a different national anthem. They brought it into Kedusha, so they had to take a different one.
Is that what happened? Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, there we go. Okay, now, what this came up with, this question came up, how to come up to food, is because there was a fish company that was named after one of the gods of the sea, okay? And the question was, could they give hashgacha to this company? Because people will then buy it. I'm going out to buy some whatever brand fish or whatever it is. Does that make any sense? I mean, they sit in the office itself. They haven't even talk about it. The name of the company. Would they be allowed to do that? And Rebelsky says, no problem. He says, no problem. He says, no one worships it. They just like the nice name that had to do with having power, blah, blah, blah. He says, no one worships it. You're allowed to use that name. Okay? He says, no problem. And he said they could give hashgacha. We here had this a very similar question. We had a company that was a freeze drying company, and the freeze drying company named their freeze dryers after Greek gods. They had Hercules, Medusa, Poseidon, and Zeus. Okay, that's what they named their Zeus. I'm sorry, Zeus. That's what they named their freeze dryers. So the question was, can we sit and talk about it? It says, is this a kosher today? Is it not kosher today? Which is the kosher tree? Can we use those names? So seemingly it should be okay. In this case, in these freeze dryers, we had an extra tzad lahakol, besides for the fact that it's a bittul. These are out of business gods, and that's because right. The Gemara says that a person went to a city and they said to him, "Where did you stay last night?" So he said, "I stayed in Kalbanoi," and they said to him, "How could you say you stayed in Kalbanoi? It's the name of a city that he stayed in." He says, "But." City that he stayed in. He said, how could you say Kalbanoi? That's the name of Avodah Zara. How can you tell us that you stayed there? The Gemara gives an answer. Okay, not relevant to the Gemara's answer. So Rashi says over there, what's the Gemara's question? Rashi says it's called, the city is referred to by the name of Avodah Zara, and since it's called by the name of Avodah Zara, the Shiloh was, so how could you use that name? If you said you stayed in, I don't know, you stayed in Skokie, that would be fine, but you said in Kalbanoi, it's the name of Avodah Zara, how could you say that? That was the Gemara's kasha. So Rashi just adds an extra word. Rashi says, Nikras Hashem Avodah Zara Sheba. Okay? That the word Sheba is extra, has no meaning. The point is just that it's in the Avodah Zara. And it makes you wonder if Rashi's saying is, you have to, when you say something is name of Avodah Zara, the city, if we call the city after the name of Avodah Zara, it had nothing to do with that Avodah Zara. Let's say they called Chicago, was named after an Avodah Zara, that's often Greece. So let's say that's where the name had come from. So the fact you're saying Chicago doesn't mean anything about the Avodah Zara. It's not connected. They happen to pick that name, but you're not. There's no association between the name and the Avodah Zara. Just a random name. It could be that's what Rashi means. But since he was in Kalbanoi, which that was the city where the Avodah Zara was headquartered, so then you were calling it. When you say Kalbanoi, you mean is the city where that Avodah Zara hangs out. That's why it's named after it. That's like it's like the capital. It's like his place. Maybe that's the only place it would be awesome. So in which case, calling our freeze dryer Hercules.
The only place would be awesome. You don't mean if you're in the city.
No, anybody can use that name, because when you say that name, you're referring to Kalbanoi, is not just the name of the city, it's the name of the city, which is called after the Avodah Zara that's there, so you're referring to the Avodah Zara. As opposed to, if you saw Hercules is the name of the freeze dryer, it has nothing to do with the freeze dryer, just a random name picked out. Maybe that's a head. Now,
some of these names, nobody associates it anymore with Avodah Zara. Very few people know that. Yesterday, Tuesday, what's the Avodah one Avodah Zara? Nobody knows about that. That might be a separate heter on its own, but some of them, for example, Zeus, that's most people know that it's a Greek god. So it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything else except
So you're saying is it's not a bittul. It's not because it was bottle. It's because no one even connects it.
We don't a bittul anymore. It's not.
No one even associates it anymore. We don't even when you say that name, it doesn't mean anything to you.
It doesn't mean Avodah Zara. My name's taken over. It has a different usage. It's the name of Avodah Zara. That's the name. That's it. Yes. So what does this name mean? It means that Avodah Zara. Yes. What a lot of these things mean.
Yes. So what is Nike? And everyone says that means the sneaker company.
It's taken over by the planet. It's just what it doesn't. Nobody is.
Even though that's what it was named. Even though they originally when they gave the name,
at some point it was associated with that. But words mean different things in different languages. What if in a country it means orange juice? It means orange juice. Anybody say you can't say orange juice? Obviously not.
Okay, that could be. Okay, now, but there's one. This is Rabbi Arya Leibowitz said that all of this. He didn't say anything about what I said beforehand, but he says this: there's no justification for saying the name Mumbai. Okay, and that's because it's a city in India. For centuries, it was called Bombay. That's what it was called. And then when the Indians took control of it in 1995, whatever that meant is whatever political thing that meant, they changed the name back to Mumbai, and they took that name because of a Hindu god that is worshipped in that city. That's its headquarters. That's where it's worshipped, and people are continuing to worship this god over there. So it's mamish the case of the Gemara. He said, "Bas b'Kalbanai." I stayed over in Kalbanai. The city was named after the Avodah Zara, so here it's named after it, and it's a functioning, up and running Avodah Zara. So I don't have a good answer. Now I could say it to you today, okay? Because the Gemara says lehislamid, you're allowed to. When you're trying to learn about it, then you're allowed to talk about these kind of things. And the Dakichuva brings it. You could do it like that for that also. That's why I could say it the past few times. But afterwards, you're out of luck. You can't say it. You can't. So if you have a flight to that city,
to say it
because they don't know. That's why they don't know. So you say you go to Bombay, and they'll say that we don't call that anymore. You say, okay, that's your problem. Okay, okay. I'm gonna skip one thing about the days of the week, the secular dates. I'm just gonna do the last one, the Trappist beer. Okay. You can hear very short of it. Don't worry. You're not going to hear the whole Torah. Okay. Aside from the four things that I told you about Avodah Zara, the Alil and the Tashmish and the Takruvis and the Noyer, there's also, you're not allowed to give Hana'ah to an Avodah Zara. You're not allowed to give them benefit. That's separate from whether the Avodah Zara or the things associated with have Isser to them. You can give them benefit. Okay. So the question was, if you buy this Trappist beer, Trappist is a type of order in the Roman Catholic Church. And if you buy their beer, are you supporting their activities and what they have to do? So therefore, does that mean you're not allowed to do that? So, at least you know, Rabbi Nihas did a lot of work on this. He wrote a long essay on this, very worthwhile, lots of information in there. And I'm going to tell you just the main reason why it's mutter, the main reason why it's okay, which he talks about. Not everything I'm going to say is what he says, but like this: the Mechaber says you can't rent a bathhouse from a church. If the money, because the money's going to go to them. Okay, if the money goes to the priest, you're not allowed to rent. You're not allowed to rent that bathhouse from them because you're supporting the church and it's what it does. And the Ramah says no. Come out, every case is going to be mutter because the prophets are not used for making the Avodah Zara or the beautifying the Avodah Zara or any of the things that we mentioned before. It's not used for that stuff. It's used so the guy could buy himself a pair of shoes and the priest could eat something. Okay, and buy them beds and linen. It pays for their support, but doesn't provide directly for the service of the idol.
Because most of it, none of it.
So he doesn't say. The implication is it's always okay because when you're renting the bathhouse, you go and you pay $1 to use their mikvah. Okay, so you're paying money. What are they doing with it? Basically, what are they doing with it is to support themselves, to keep themselves going. How much of that goes to their what's come out nothing. He says unless you know what's going to that. But as a rule, you can be. And the pashas to me is that it would be okay. It would be okay, meaning you don't have to think about, well, maybe there's a percentage of it. Now, Rabbi Nihas says... You're
saying Pashas for the Trappist beer is okay?
That it would be okay for that. Now, Rabbi Nihas says, wait a second.
You didn't talk about if you're buying it from the monk, you're buying it in the store.
I'm going to talk about that in a second. Okay. Now, Rabbi Nihas says, wait a second. But if you look in Dayan Weiss says it's true about a similar thing. There it was about lending money to them, whatever, a similar thing. And Dayan Weiss says, he says, seemingly it should be mutter for this reason that I just told you, which is the money that you give, that the benefit you're giving to them is just for their general support. The Rama says it's mutter. He says, I don't know. Dakichuva brings a sefer called Chaim Biyad, and he says lahachmir. So he says, I don't have the sefer, so because I don't have it, I don't know what he says. So you should be machmir about this. Okay, you should be machmir about this. Okay, so I found the sefer. Okay, it's on Hebrew books. Okay, I went to the sefer, and it's very obvious why he's machmir. Okay, he's machmir because the Mechaber says you can't sell the money to the thing. Okay, and that makes a lot of sense because the Sefer Chaim Biyad is from Chaim Palagi, who's a tremendous Sephardi gadol from Turkey. So of course the Mechaber says you're not allowed to do it.
Just pass on the Mechaber. So.
It's straight out. He says the Mechaber says you're not allowed to do it. So you're not allowed to do it. That's the tshuva is one column long. And it says because the Mechaber says you're not allowed to do it. So you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to give them money. I forgot exactly what his case was. You're not allowed to do it because you don't like the Mechaber. Okay, he's a Sephardi, so of course he said like the Mechaber. But but the Ramah says that it's mutter. We don't have to worry about this because you could assume it's going to just for the general use of v'cheina. And so, and Bain Weiss was etzem. He was ready to be make. He thought the fact that basically the money goes to the church and not to the priest rather than to the service was all fine. He said, I don't know what the sefer. It says something in that sefer. I don't know what it says. I don't know what the sefer is. So I'll be chayshish for that shita. But now that we know that, so we're okay. So now Rabbi Nihas also pointed out. He was concerned about things maybe a little bit goes, and they had some rayas that he thought were very convincing that a little bit is a problem. Again, I think that it's right here in the Darkei Tshuva. The Rambam himself, it sounds like that in the Darkei Tshuva. All this sounding like just the fact that there's maybe a part of it is going to. I didn't find that convincing. He also mentioned this thing that you said beforehand, which is this whole chashash is only assumed you buy it straight from the monastery itself, buy it straight from them, which it seems a lot of it is, but straight from them. But if you buy it from a retailer, you buy it from somebody else, like if you buy it in a supermarket here, so then they bought it from the church, and then you're buying from them. That's also another reason to be mutter. Excuse me, if you buy it over there.
That's what he passes in the sefer, English sefer on Yisuri Hano.
Okay.
That's what he passes like.
That.
So it should be avoided. Buying it directly from them should be avoided. You can buy it from, but if it's sold.
Okay.